All right, so our next grouping of material are the Old Venice and Old Los Angeles, or Venice and Los Angeles. We can leave out the old. I thought maybe we could go through these. And some of the contact sheets were dated '64, but we're thinking this was earlier.
Some of these go back.
material.
Some of these go back to the 1950s.
Okay.
The late 1950s, just by the locale.
Okay.
And these are like pictures I just took walking around Venice Beach, walking around downtown Los Angeles, walking around in just neighborhoods in Venice. Some I know are a whole series of pictures I know I took on my lunch hours at the Eames office, right in the center of Venice, and I just go out for a walk up and down the alleys, and I recognize those images almost immediately. I guess that's a Venice alley. And it's like sort of, you can't imagine putting together a scene like this, a backyard with a clothesline, with a broken toy horse, a broken bicycle, a little boy sitting on the back steps, and a white rabbit loose in the yard, and it's a dirt yard. It's like, how lucky can you be to find something like that?
Yeah. What is this?
This is just a view of a building being demolished. A whole series of things in Ocean Park that were just being torn down in order to build giant luxury condominium apartments. And there's a little backyard, back wall of Windward Avenue in Venice. Just walk around and I see trash cans and meters.
And look, it says MG 61748, 1948.
And that's probably the scene, the back of a building in Venice, walking up and down an alley.
And when you say Ocean Park, what did you consider Ocean Park at that time? Was it where the pier was?
Yes. And well, actually, it's a strict geographic division. There's Ocean Park is the southern part of Santa Monica technically, but Ocean Park has its own. People are pretty sure that you cross a certain street, it's Ocean Park.
So I live in Ocean Park.
And then at a certain point, it becomes Venice as you go down the beach. And I think Rose Avenue may be a dividing line between Ocean Park and Venice, because they are strict, political entities.
Yeah.
Venice is Los Angeles. Ocean Park is part of Santa Monica.
Right, that's right.
But I mean, often people just say the beach. Like that's the Ocean Park Pier after it burned and was abandoned.
Right.
And that's kind of marvelous. I have a couple of beautiful prints of that, and a number of photographers have photographed that same scene. I've seen several, and that's the Ocean Park Pier in its last days when it was still functioning.
And what year was it? What year did it burn down?
I don't remember. I'm not going to do it yet. And here's a view from the Playa del Rey Hills before the marina was built in Venice.
Oh my God.
And there was no marina. There was Bologna Creek. And look how empty it is. The oil wells are still there. They're oceanfront lots, empty. That's kind of a marvelous historic thing, because no one can imagine any amount of open land like that on the beach. But Venice was like the end of the world, and it was not a privileged place to be. Now it's just full of $1 million condominiums.
Yeah.
These are just the things you see walking around any neighborhood, and probably and this was Billy L. I have a series of shots taken inside Billy L. Bankston's studio, which was in the process of being demolished.
You can see his name on the mail there.
And then there's some pictures of his bathroom, which is, and that's probably the same building as one of the artists.
Well, look, it says
studio.
no admittance without appointment, and it says absolutely no exceptions, and it says, doesn't it say B.A.B.?
That's probably Billy L. Bankston's front door. And that was like maybe 10 years earlier. When I was walking around with my 4x5 doing early in the morning when there were no people. And that's the view of Venice Beach when the oil wells were there. And this was the pier and its entertainment things out of another era. This could be the 1930s. And it probably was the 1930s, because it probably had not been changed. And that was that series I did of still lifes when there were no people around.
This is a great shot. Nuns crossing the Great Divide for a daily stroll.
And that's a little grotesquerie. Oh, this is sort of nice. I mean, that's the way I dried my film. Hung it up in the living room.
So is this your living room?
That's my living room. And yes, and that living room will show up in a number of other pictures. But these are all 2 1/4 rolls of film that I developed. Here's a 35 millimeter strip.
And you had,
I had collected these signs when I was driving in the desert. I remember there were some religious group had put these signs, and they were fluorescent colors, and I had collected them. And that's probably Windward Avenue in Venice. This is the scene where, this is the area that Orson Welles used in Touch of Evil for a lot of his shots. And that's 128 Georgina Street, where a lot of people lived. And this is the backyard of where I lived. We had backyard incinerators at that point to burn our trash, which is sort of clearly a different world.
what did you do? You put the trash in there
And burned
it. You lit it on fire?
Yes,
Oh.
That's probably somewhere in Beverly Glen.
See, to me, some of these look like some of your collages with the,
I think that often happens. And this is my front porch of when I lived on the Speedway. And there are a lot of fascinating that I found, because there are some other photographs where you can actually see what my choice library was, in addition to all the other books. The Kinsey reports, they had both come out. Malraux's Voices of Silence, and Isaac Dinesen, a whole bunch. It's very fascinating to see what I felt were choice.
and whose drawings were these?
This is a photograph I'd taken, and this was a piece of art I had done. And I don't remember doing art, but I know I did occasionally a few things with watercolor. And a cat.
What's this on there? Can you make that out?
An exposure meter.
Yeah. And this is where the shot of you and Walter was taken.
Number of pictures. There are a number of pictures of different groupings of people on the front porch. And here's like a bigger view of the living room. Well, actually, I had put prints up on that wing where the religious things had been, and I had a wall of photographs, and I actually still have this. You should come look at it sometime. This beautiful salvaged mirror I found from an abandoned house just before it was destroyed. And I put a photograph and a flower. And this was my LP collection, and my Heath kits. Some of us made our own amplifiers.
Oh, really?
Yes, you bought a kit and you soldered and followed instruction. It's an amplifier, a tiny little preamp, probably an FM tuner. A lot of people fell asleep in this corner. Those cushions show up with a lot of people asleep on them.
Underneath.
Mm-hmm, yes.
That's like high ceilings.
It wasn't. It's a wide-angle lens.
Oh.
That gives that. This is probably something I shot on 4x5. And here's a John Altoon drawing.
It's a great time capsule.
A parking 35 cents. This was behind some building at Windward Avenue. So that's actually what the world, that part of the world looked like, very just straightforward documentary snapshots.
But part of the world that's no
And some of them
longer-
print beautifully. They become exhibition prints, and they're so strange because they really weren't exhibition views.
Now, do you think we should look through any more of these?
I think anybody, it's fun to look through, but it maybe it's kind of repetitious.
Okay.
Because it looks to me like just more
Things-
of
yes,
the, more
that's
of
what I
the,
think.
more of the same. Because I had a camera with me all the
Now,
time.
with this is the one I wanted to ask you about. Is that you?
It's me with my hands in my hand in my pants. Yes.
Is it a self-portrait or who took?
No, a friend of mine took that picture. An architect friend of mine was out because he had a small Linhof, and but the film size wasn't mine.
Okay. And so does this mean this whole contact sheet was not yours?
A couple of them were. This was mine, and this was mine.
Okay.
I
And
can-
whose apartment is
That was
this?
his apartment.
Okay. All right, so that was the one I wanted to ask you about. Here's some of the.
He happened to end up marrying my second wife after she left me.
Really? Was there anything going on with him when you were?
No, I
married?
don't think so. No.
All right, let's see, I think that was it for that folder. Let me just double check. Okay, this is the one I did want to ask about.
Oh my. You know the corner at Santa Monica Canyon, where there's that tall apartment building?
Near your house now?
Right, you know,
Near Entrada?
it's at PCH.
Yes.
This is what that slope was. There had been
Oh, really?
there had been an escalator type thing, and we up on from the Bluffs, we'd climb down the slope to go to the beach across the street, and you can see by the cars that had to be the late 40s or early 50s, and these are all shot with my little camera. What do you call this thing? It's sort of a tram escalator.
Funicular?
Yeah, that's what was on the corner of
Oh, my.
the Bluffs, the Santa Monica Bluffs, just before Santa Monica Canyon. That's probably my first wife, and these are old friends. And these were shot with that Perfex,
Okay.
I can tell. They laughed a lot with mine. That's very funny to see.
Okay, and so this is what I wanted to ask you about. This is the
This
Venice
is,
West when they had,
yeah, this is from the 60s.
yeah.
It was, part of the Beat generation. And the police, for some reason, hostel is something that was really basically very gentle, because people would go in there, smoke pot, no, not openly, but and drink coffee, and they started having a poetry and jazz program. And the police said, oh, you can't have poetry and jazz if you serve coffee. You then become a place of entertainment, and you need an entertainment license. You can have coffee, and you can talk and read papers, but the moment someone stands up and starts reading poetry, you need a license.
That's great.
So
So they got closed down,
they
because
were-
what's the
they were-
poster in the
They
window?
were closed down, so this was part of the thing, Poets Arise, no more poetry. Until the police relent, and the police did relent.
Didn't Larry Lipton in his book, did he use these particular images?
No, he didn't, no, I was a step or two removed from him, and most of us felt Lawrence Lipton was, we know he did good things in that he helped people function, and he got publicity for stuff, but he was just too much of a publicizer, and we
Right.
basically wanted to stay anonymous.
Yes.
None of us wanted to be part of a movement. And when he moved in, and he was part of a publicity world, and there were a whole circle of Venice poets and artists that circulated around him or gathered around him. But that wasn't the circle that I was in.
Right, but this, for me, this photograph really is so much of that time.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And when Barbara and I became active in CORE, they would make themselves available for CORE publicity and recreational things to raise money.
So you could have meetings in there.
Yes,
and-
yeah.
Who ran that? Do you remember?
A man named John Haig, who was one of the founders of the Peace and Freedom Party. This was probably a shot with my Perfex, and you can see why I wasn't satisfied, because nothing's sharp.
Yeah, it's all.
But it's my ashcan school. This is, an alley in downtown Los Angeles, and this is a photograph that I've always thought of as basically my first photograph, that I feel satisfied enough to say, yes, you can see that I could see things, and even though I couldn't make a decent print, at least I had some possibilities. And I was very young. And then, see, now this is having a slightly better camera. Your ash cans take on some character. And here's another of those back. This is like the back of Windward Avenue, the trash. There's a big difference in the way these worlds look. But I was really, when I took this picture, I was seeing something like this. That's an interesting group. I guess there's some logic in how they were put together.
Okay. Well, that's good that we identified that photograph. So this is, we went through this. All right, now we're moving on. Here's actually some more from that same series, but I did want to look through them because I think that's important work. And there's that same photograph, but we won't look at that. And these are all also under the old Los Angeles. But there's some of the watchtowers.
This is a kind of marvel, a little bit of technological confusion. It was supposed to be a spectrum analyzer, and it came out anal spectrumizer. And it was on Olympic Boulevard.
Really?
And I photographed it in full color and made prints. Yeah, and it stayed there for months and months and months.
That's great.
And it's kind of marvelous. You got this cute girl.
She's smiling with her bottle. That's great.
And that's probably kids in Watts. I did a whole series of kids in Watts.
Okay,
And
so
there's-
here's, yeah.
Yeah, there's at the San Bernardino Tower, the Watts Towers.
And so how were you drawn to the watchtowers? Did you just go there to
just
photograph?
a place to go, because it's one of the interesting cultural things. And if I had my camera, I'd just take pictures. But I never got hung up on making that one of my targets. Several photographers just became engrossed.
Yeah,
And Seymour Rosen, who just died,
yep.
did a whole beautiful series.
Well, and wasn't he had a whole foundation that was dedicated to,
But when he started out, he didn't have anything, and he photographed the Watts Towers, and he did, beautiful coverage of them. And I think that inspired him to look for other sort of folk art.
right, but he also started a foundation, didn't he,
Yes.
to preserve?
That sort of thing, yes.
Now,
Oh, my.
who was,
Oh, that's Ed Pearl.
oh, that's Ed Pearl? Oh, my God.
Oh, and this is,
These are the Ash Grove photos,
oh,
right? These are the ones.
okay, now,
And who's this?
Gordy, somebody who was one of the managers. Oh my God, these are the Ash Grove photographs.
Oh, no.
And Ed asked me, he said, do you have any Ash Grove photographs? I said, I think the Getty has them. And this was pictures taken of the burned out after the Gasanos, the anti-Castro Cubans,
Oh, really?
firebombed the building, didn't destroy it. Oh my.
Let's make a little, oh, yeah, I did make a note. These are the Ash Grove. And
So they do it.
Disneyland.
Because he and his producer are going to contact you.
Okay, that's great.
And I said, this is exactly what this is all about. And apparently at the same time I was photographing the Black Panthers. Let me look at this magnifier.
And
Because,
this is the interior after it was on fire, and
Yes.
these are the guys,
and there's Ed Pearl and Gordy, whoever's his name is. This is very young Ed Pearl. And here's somebody who eventually became the mayor of Santa Monica. One of
really?
our circle. And this is a political circle, not art people. Oh, that's
So
right.
the Ash Grove was burned down by,
It was firebombed by the anti-Castro Cubans because Ed Pearl made the building available for fundraisers and entertainers, and there were a lot of pro-Cuban demonstrations, and the people were going to Cuba to work in the cane fields. That was part of the support Castro because of the anti-Castro behavior of the United States government, such as sponsoring an invasion. I remember I got semi-beaten up in one of the federal buildings at a trial by some of the anti-Castro Cubans. I was supposed to have a bodyguard. There was a trial going on, and they started shoving me around.
well,
Oh, this is remarkable. I think for future purposes, to identify that here are some of the Ash Grove pictures.
yeah, well, I made a note here,
Oh, good.
and I actually had a note beforehand, but when he calls, we'll be able to point him in the right direction.
See, this is dated June in the 1970.
1970? Is that late?
Well, I must have, I think so.
Yeah, and see, this
The
says, this,
the Panthers
Yeah, yeah.
were functioning at that time,
here's
and this is more, this is the same thing.
This is the same. Here's Irving Blum's gallery.
Mm. And this photograph, prints have shown up in a number of beautiful places.
Cash and carry.
Somebody had, and
That's great.
these are more of these local scenes. Oh, and here, you know the Beverly Center.
Yeah.
These pictures are all the corner of La Cienega and Beverly Boulevard.
Really?
That's what was on that corner. There was a children's park with a little Ferris wheel. There was a locksmith. One of these prints is going to show up in the Grable Press book.
Hmm.
I had some, beautiful big prints made that they found.
That's great. Now, what is this?
It's there was some Los Angeles high school that was destroyed, and then I caught this in the process of demolition.
Hmm.
It's on Olympic Boulevard somewhere.
Okay, so that's that.
Oh, and here's when I did have a system. I dated it. Oh, come on, this is too funny.
The pleasure.
Here's another one. This was supposed to be a pressurizer, but they played here's a shock absorber, the new Delco Pleasurizer. I mean, how much pleasure a shock absorber? Well, I guess you can imagine.
I think somebody had a sense of humor who worked for the.
That's funny. I thought it was funny.
Now, this photo is kind of an iconic photo of yours.
A lot of people
Yeah.
have been chosen. And that building is still there.
Were you ever tempted to go shoot it now?
No, but I've seen it.
Yeah.
Who's in charge of photography here?
Ben?
No, not in the research.
Oh,
Weston,
yeah.
when he came up, when I came up with photographs, the only picture of maybe 40 prints that we had laid out, the only one that interested him was this one. And you know what interested him? He sent somebody to get a map guide, the book that shows all the streets.
Yeah.
Because he said,
Thomas Guide.
it's impossible. He said it's impossible for those two streets to coincide. Because they run parallel. And we spent 20 minutes getting a Thomas Guide, and him looking at the map and saying, yes, they do.
Does the museum have that print?
Yes.
There you go. Now, what was Disneyland?
Oh, that's another piece of folk art. It's like a man in his front and backyard created this place. It's in Echo Park area somewhere, and he just found objects.
So this is.
This is his little treasure, his little palace, his little garden with a mannequin head,
Okay.
things on a roof. This high voltage
Gorge.
sign is the high voltage sign that a lot of people have. It used to be what the power company used, and everyone picked them up one place or another. And because I know I had one, and somebody else I know. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just
Yeah, that's
wanted to
more
kinda
it
know.
is.
Yeah,
Now, that's the sort of thing that Seymour would have documented.
right. Well, it reminded me of, what was Christine's friend in the desert? That
Oh,
elder gentleman?
the black artist?
Yeah.
In fact, I just sent a piece of art back to New York to the Tilton. It had the Tilton show. It got incredibly good reviews, and I had a piece of work Barbara and I had purchased after the Lost Uprising.
And these are all Ed Keenholz pieces, but I thought maybe you could just tell us, we don't have to go through each individual
Well,
one,
actually,
but
and why I have them is kind of I don't know.
did you even shoot these?
No.
Okay.
No, these are all, I apparently accumulated other people's files. Like, either things are being thrown away, or does anybody want these? Like, these are pictures that somebody had taken commercially for Ed Keenholz, documenting his pictures.
Okay, maybe
And-
if somebody knew, you would be around to pass them on.
Well, at this point, I had this pleasure that all the people who told me, Charles, you can't save everything, you have to throw things away, were proven wrong.
Oh, good. You had some photos of Greenwich Village in 1956. Did you guys go?
Yes, Patricia, my second wife, and I went back to New York. I had a connection with a photo agency, and I got to meet a lot of art directors and editorial people through the agency. I got an assignment to photograph somebody for Harper's Bazaar, which went pretty nicely. And Patricia and I were in town, in New York for the first, this is kind of funny, we were in, Lawrence Lipton was also back there for a book signing. And we happened to go in, and we were the only people he knew, and he was very happy to see some people, though but we were sitting in a sidewalk cafe the first weekend we were there, and a newspaper crew, a photographer and a writer, approached us and said, "Can we take your picture and get a little interview with you?" And they presented us as typical Greenwich Village beatniks.
That's great.
It was very funny.
That's funny. You fit right in. Well, so this is,
yeah.
we're segueing now into, this is the artist tower, but this was what you were saying, you were starting to say the other day, that this is one of the only examples in which the artists and the political movement kind of coalesced, and the artists.
Quite astounding, and what it was that led to the people unifying around this. I think it had to be the energy, which a lot of people had, but the personalities. That Irving Petlin is probably the one person who unified and had a style of making this seem possible. And when I suddenly see this telegram.
And so who was Irving Petlin?
He's an artist. He's an artist now. He's living in France now, but he had been in France during the French-Algerian conflict when he was a very young person, and become involved with all of these people.
So what is that telegram?
Simone de Beauvoir, Paul Sartre, Andrew Perchuck, all these people who, when they saw what was happening here in Los Angeles, sent us this telegram.
Which says what?
Solidarity, total solidarity with the Artist Protest Committee enterprise. Sent to Irving Petlin, 520, it's a telegram.
Yep.
520 Strand in Santa Monica, signed by 10 of the top French culture people, including Sartre and André.
Will you read the list?
Colette Audry, Michel Boutor, Maurice Nadeau, Olivier de Magnier, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, André Breton, Michel Léris, André Masson, René Leibowitz, Matta, and Max Clairac. I mean, how many people get a telegram from people like that here in Los Angeles?
And you shot it.
Actually, I had the telegram for a while. I think I probably, somewhere the telegram itself must exist, because people would give things to me to copy, and because I was working at the Eames office and I have 24-hour access to the darkroom and the graphic studio. So a lot of the Eames were making great contributions that they weren't totally aware of, but they knew what I was doing.
Yeah. We'll get to the Eames material in a bit.
And that's.
So tell us just a little bit about what the Artist Tower was, what year it was, how it came
Well,
together,
I have
how.
no idea what year it is.
Okay,
It's in the 60s sometime. I mean,
66.
Well, it was, the idea was to create a public statement by artists protesting the Vietnam War. And the right people just got together and collaborated and got a great designer to design the tower, found a giant vacant lot on Sunset Boulevard at the intersection of Sunset and, what street is it? What was the street that had all the galleries?
La Cienega?
La Cienega, yes. And that lot is still there, abandoned with one-story building. It's never been utilized adequately. And we got it rented, and the tower built, constructed, and then Giant put up signs and solicited paintings and art objects from all over the world to celebrate the artist protest tower against the war.
So who was the designer? So can we go through each one?
Sure.
Who was the designer? Do you remember? Do you know?
You know who it is. I don't remember.
I do?
I
Okay.
mean, names. Who?
It wasn't Mark de Souza, right?
Yes, it was Mark de Souza.
Okay. I guess I do know who it is.
Yes, and he designed it with the help of some local engineers. And it was constructed by he was up on the tower doing the construction. Had to be tested to meet city standards, and so they hung an automobile from the main structural key point. And then once it was built, had hundreds and hundreds of standard size art objects sent from all over the world by all sorts of artists. And then it got a lot of publicity. In the course of the construction, it was subject to attack by people, and it was, fortunately, you can't firebomb some metal sculpture very successfully, but you can destroy the signs and everything. But it got a lot of publicity, and then there was a big, inauguration, and people came from the East Coast. Got a lot of publicity, and then we auctioned the pieces of art off.
Well, I noticed you have a whole box of folders and articles, and the photographs were in Art in America.
And it's still being memorialized, because just this last year there was another artist protest tower done at the Whitney, in the Whitney's front yard. I don't know geographically how that works.
Does Mark de Souza own some of these photographs?
Yes, I think so. And this shows the type, the format of paintings and art objects that were on display.
So people had sent things in, and each one of these is representative of a different artist?
From a different person, yes.
And the car was put there to show that it was structurally sound?
That was yeah. Apparently
humorous.
there was a city thing to show that it was structurally sound, and they decided this would be a great way to test it. And apparently this was the key point that would establish its structural integrity. And then there's some photographs taken outside the County Art Museum of local artists with the different signs and the posters that were being used. And there are some photographs of police harassment of demonstrators. These are probably demonstrations on La Cienega on Artists Row outside the galleries. We had big parades and marches there. And we broke all the laws about crosswalks and crowds.
And what was it, they used to have these walks every Monday night, the galleries were open on?
Yes, and we picked those. This is someone who was beaten up by a couple of soldiers. There was a lot of hostility and unpleasantness with people came by and would taunt the people who are working. And he was beaten up by the soldiers at the site of the tower, and then arrested by the police. And they charged him with, disorderly conduct. And in the course of the demonstrations outside the galleries, there would be harassment and there'd be little fights and struggles.
So I was asking before about on Monday evenings, there used to be walks, all the galleries would be open.
And that would be occasion for demonstrations. And at one point they organized, a lot of the galleries organized. Okay. That's the one that just appeared in a big art magazine this last month.
Really?
It had the same bad color shift. Well, they probably got it from you.
Maybe. Was there a credit line?
No, but yes, in the magazine, yes. Yes, there's a credit line. And you probably have the magazine somewhere, it just arrived. It's called Famous Artists or something like that.
Famous Artists?
I mean, it's an art magazine that I'd never seen before, but they called me and I said that you had material, so probably somebody. No, and on the artist walk, we arranged a whiteout. We asked the artists to cover all their artwork on this one occasion to show their solidarity with the anti-war movement. And there were 3 or 4 artists who were very sure that they did not want to participate. Billy Allen Bengston specifically. In fact, he said, you know, if people in Orange County have more money from more industry, it means they'll buy more art. And Keenholz was very much against any political, which is strange, because he was the most socially conscious of all the artists. For some reason, he just did not like the idea of political demonstrations, though his work was probably the most political of any and all the artists. And from my point of view, he was the most important artist of that period. But I think it was a personality thing. He didn't like the idea of working in a group.
He had his own way of expressing his...
Right, and he would not participate in this at all. But he was clearly the most radical, the most socially commenting artist of that whole period.
All right, well, so now we're moving on to the Eames material. And I thought maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you did for them and who they were and what this span of work that we're going to go through. Because you worked for them from 63 to 70.
It was a 5 or 6 year period at least. Let me swallow.
I had it was about 7 years. And they were architects and designers with...
Well, Charles and Ray Eames were probably the outstanding Southern California designers of architecture, furniture, graphics. Their chairs are in the Museum of Modern Art. Their toys, they just were multi-talented people in design. And he started out as an architect, and his buildings using industrial standard materials were part of the whole movement of idea of being able to make expressive, inexpensive, great houses. A whole movement that flourished at the end of the Second World War. Was we were going to build a new world, have a new world, and none of them ever turned out to be commercially exploitable as had been hoped, but they turned out being houses that rich people own and now show off as part of that whole period of modernism and merging of industrialism with human needs. And he went on to create incredibly great furniture, the Eames lounge chair. He made marvelous short films. He did museums. He worked for the giant corporations. He and his wife Ray were like the most multi-talented design people. He probably ranks with there may be 5 other people in this period of history in America. And he's like, and if you worked at the Eames office and you went to a party or an opening, this 5 or 6 Eames people would all stand and talk together, and everybody else would look at them enviously. And it's very, like we were the people who had made it, even if we were doing nothing important, even if we were emptying trash, or for a while what I was doing, just working in the darkroom, being part of the Eames team, and it's still sort of a mystique. Someone just called and someone said, "Oh, I just met somebody who said he knew you at the Eames office 40 years ago." Come on.
How did you get that gig?
Who did we talk about that just died?
Anita Day?
No, the photographer.
Seymour.
Seymour. Apparently Seymour Rosen was offered, they needed a darkroom worker, but that meant if you worked in the darkroom, you would also be a photographer. Seymour Rosen I got a call from the Eames office saying, Seymour Rosen gave us your name. He apparently had turned the job down, like whatever was going through his, and Seymour and I were very close at the time. We saw each other a lot, and that was part of being from the art cultural scene. And they said we need someone in photography to work, and it'll be a lot of darkroom work, and there'll be photograph. And I said, all right. Barbara and I had just been married. We'd been married about a year or two, and I went out to talk to them, and they said, well, shoot some film for us. Go down to the train loading areas and photograph train boxcars and insignia that are on the side of and I shot a couple of rolls of film, and they said, yes, fine, come work for us. And it just started that way.
And what type of work did you have to do? What were their photographic needs?
They were making a film for the World's Fair that was just coming up in New York City. And they were making a giant multi-screen film. In fact, they designed a building in which the 7 screens would all be functioning simultaneously. They were making that film. They needed processing. They needed photographs. So I ended up taking a lot of photographs, some of which everybody in the